Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Ujjwal Singh, a serious aspirant. In this video, we will break down today's Indian Express editorial in a simple and strategic way, helping you stay informed, build strong opinions, and boost your exam preparation. So let's dive into today's key issues and insights. Crisp, relevant, and exam ready. So let's see what's the news today. US enters war, bombs Iranian sites. So we know that Israel and Iran are in a conflict, and US have entered the war with and US have bombed Iran's nuclear sites. So there were three sites which were bombed by US. One is Natanz, second is Fordo, and third is Isfahan. So Natanz is the largest uranium enrichment center of Iran. Just remember these uranium sites are these are important for the exam. Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. Okay, and let's see how Trump's gamble may affect region, world, and himself. Let's study this one. How can Trump's gamble that he is playing with the Middle East can affect the region? In a bold political gamble, US President Donald Trump has now entered the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. After initially distancing himself from Tel Aviv's strike on Tehran's nuclear infrastructure earlier this month, same month when Israel attacked on Iran's nuclear site, the US have said that it was not good, but the last day, US itself bombed the Iranian nuclear facility. So, how the things are changing is really amazing. Whether or not this was his original intent, Trump's internal sorry, Trump's intervention carries far-reaching implications. Whether or not this was the intent of the United States, but the intervention of Trump in the war, it carries a far-reaching implication. It can have implications that is not good in the for the coming days, not just for U.S. domestic politics and foreign policy, but also for the geopolitics of Middle East and broader Asia. It will just not affect US, it will not just affect Middle East, it will also affect the Asia. Mostly we have seen yesterday Iran said that they are blocking uh, that they will block the ships that will go to the Europe through the strait near them. So that's really a bad thing for the world that's happening around, and we can see that in coming days the oil prices may increase, and we all know that if the oil prices increases, the uh, the prices of the goods just increases. Okay, Trump's principal political challenge may not come from international criticism labeling his actions as illegal, a view echoed by the opposition Democratic Party, but rather from within his own support base, the Make America Great Again coalition. It's not like only the world is criticizing Trump; even their own political support that he's getting inside the country, they are also opposing their move. A key element that propelled Trump back into the White House has been the solid support of the populist right wing that has been vocal in its opposition to America's endless wars. So basically, the people who voted for the Trump, they never wanted, they always opposed the endless war of the US. As we know that anywhere a war is going on, US is there. So that's why the people are not happy with the endless wars, and they voted against the government, and Trump came to power. Okay, let's see what it continues on page number 2. Both Iran and the United Nations nuclear watchdog said there were no immediate signs of radioactive contamination around the sites. It was said that there were no radioactive contamination. President Donald Trump claimed the US completely and fully obliterated the sites. Okay, fully obliterated the sites. But the Pentagon reported sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. It has said that it did not destroy much, but have done severe damage and destruction to the site. Amid fears of wider regional conflict, the Trump administration sent a clear message that it wanted to restart diplomatic talks with Iran. And after bombing, they said that, okay, we want to talk. Okay, we can talk. It's just like father is hitting his son, and after some time, it says, okay, let's talk what happened. Amid fears of a wider regional conflict, the Trump administration sent a clear message that it wanted to restart diplomatic talks with Iran. Defense Secretary said that the US does not seek war with Iran. Okay, the US Congress said US does not seek war. A country who is involved in every single war says that they are not going for the war. He said that the intervention is not open-ended and labeled the overnight strike as intentionally limited. It says that it was just limited and will not move ahead. US Vice President JD Vance said America has no interest in boots on the ground in Iran, saying that he doesn't believe the strikes would lead to a wider war. We want to end their nuclear program and then we want to talk to the Iranians about a long term settlement here. US just said that they just don't want that Iran makes their own nuclear site. This is a reset. This is an opportunity for Iranians to take the smart path. We certainly hope they will. But Tehran said the time for diplomacy had passed and that it had the right to defend itself. Now, if someone will bomb you, you will not just say that, okay, you bombed me, but now I will ready to talk or I'm ready to talk. So they just said that the time to talk has already passed and we are going to bomb you too. That was the words that were the words used by the Iranians, and they said that they will bomb the US bases in the Middle East. This aggression showed that the US is the primary instigator of the Zionist. Okay, this says that US was the instigator of the Zionist regime, hostile actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Reuters adds Iran's Supreme National Security Council will make a final decision on whether to close the Strait of Hormuz. As I was talking, the Strait of Hormuz was closed by the Iran, and they said that there will no ships will pass to Europe through this strait. So Strait of Hormuz is an important site. Just remember the countries that is near Strait of Hormuz. Iran's press TV said on Sunday after parliament was reported to have backed the measure. Around 20% of global oil and gas demand flows through the strait. Around 20%. Just remember this. 20% of global oil and gas demands flows through that Strait of Hormuz. So it is very important path for the world. The decision is not yet final, and it was not officially reported that Parliament had in fact adopted a bill to that effect. Well, it is not official, but they are talking about this. Trump earlier warned there would be additional strikes if Tehran retaliated against US forces. There will either be peace or there will be tragedy for Iran. And it was said that there will be either peace or there will be tragedy for the Iran. With the attack, the US has inserted itself into a war it spent decades trying to avoid. Success could mean ending Iran's nuclear ambitions and eliminating the last significant state threat to the security of Israel, its close ally. We all know that Israel is a close ally with the US, and they don't want that any Arab countries make their own nuclear bomb, because if they will, as it is said by US, because if they will make a nuclear bomb, they will attack Israel, and that's not good, because Israel, we know, all know there's a conflict, release and conflict going on in the whole part of the world, either it is India or Israel. With the attack, for Iran supreme leader, it could mark the end of ambitious campaign to transform the Islamic Republic into a greater regional power that holds enriched nuclear material, a step away from weapons grade. Basically, why Iran wants to make it, as they want that just being an Islamic Republic, if they got the nuclear power, they will become a greater regional power into the whole Arab among the whole Arab countries. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is their president, prime minister, or whatever you can say, their head, warning the US that strikes targeting the Islamic Republic will result in irreparable damage for them. They said that it will be not good for the US. Iran, battered by Israel's largest ever assault on it, began on June 13, has a few ways it could retaliate. It could launch a wave of attacks on US forces stationed in the Middle East with the missiles, as it was said. They said that they will attack US bases, or it would attempt to bottleneck of global oil supplies. Bottleneck means like they will choke the Strait of Hormuz, that is between UAE and Iran, or it could hurry to develop a nuclear weapon with what remains of its program, or they will just go for the nuclear weapon. Iran has long maintained that its nuclear power program was peaceful, and US intelligence agencies have assessed that Tehran is not actively pursuing a bomb. However, Trump and Israeli leaders have argued Iran could quickly assemble a nuclear weapon. They said that they have not still got the nuclear weapon, but they can assemble it quickly. Israel has significantly degraded Iran's air defense and offensive missile capabilities and damaged nuclear enrichment facilities, but only the US military has the bunker buster bombs. Okay, and we know that Iran is making their bombs inside the mountains. So, US military has that bunker buster bombs, that is 30,000 pound precision GBU G7 massive ordnance penetratory bomb. Okay, it's an ordnance penetratory bomb, believed to be able to penetrate about 200 feet below the surface before exploding. The possibility offered the best chance of destroying sites deep under the ground. 14 of the bombs were used on two nuclear sites, including Fordo. Okay, so on the Fordo it was destroyed. So it's just where it was destroyed. Okay, so it just shows that when the bomb it was damaged, either it was Fordo or it was also said that before the US attacked, Iran have removed the nuclear material from the targeted sites. The International Atomic Energy Agency did not respond a request for the comment over Iran possibly moving nuclear material. Uh, so it's all this. Remember that they attacked and the war is going on. Okay, let's move fastly with the. Okay, so is there some? Okay, so there is just a tiger reserve. Just remember, Sariska Tiger Reserve. Okay, where it is? Okay, so Sariska Tiger Reserve. Just find and come where the Sariska Tiger Reserve is located. Okay, let's go to the editorial page directly. It's what Delhi. The ongoing is okay. So let's see. Israel-Iran conflict. Why Indian military supplies sorry may not be hit as of now. The ongoing Iran-Israel conflict may not have an immediate impact on Indian military hardware and maintenance support, except if it turns into another protracted protracted conflict stretching several months. Official closely monitoring the conflict told the Indian Express. So it says that it will not affect Indian military, but it may affect the. Well, it said that it's not. It will not affect Indian military in current time, but if the war stays for longer time, it can affect the Indian military hardware and maintenance support. The war is too new as of now to show any displayable impact. It's too new to say that what impact it can have on Indian military since on hardware. Any diversion of weapon stock can take place if the conflict is drawn out. This is significant as India is actively working on replenishing much of its Israeli origin weapons, which have been extensively used for Operation Sindoor against Pakistan last month in response to the April 22 Pahalgam terror attack, killing 26 people. Over the last decade, India has purchased a range of military equipment and weapons from Israel, covering missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, sensors, and radars. We have seen that Israel is a good trade partner and military partner with the India, and we are purchasing military weapons or the missiles or the UAVs or the sensors and radars or air defense systems and small arms with the Israel. According to Stockholm intern, so according to SIPRI data 2020-24, Israel accounted for 3% of global arms export, eighth largest exporter globally. The largest single importer of Israeli arms was India. Okay, so the largest single importer of Israeli arms, India imports 34% of the total Israel arms, followed by US 13% and the Philippines 8%. Some of these include Sky Striker loitering munitions, like Sky Striker. It is an Israeli loitering munitions. They can loiter or hover in the air close to the designated target before self-destructing or impact. Heron and Searcher UAVs. So we should remember these names for as it is important for the FCAT exam. Either it's Derby, beyond visual range air-to-air missiles. Okay, so Derby beyond visual missile. It is also a Israel-made Spice 2000 guided bombs, Spike anti-guided missiles, Spike anti-tank guided missiles, Spider surface-to-air missile system, Barak 8 surface-to-air defense system, air defense system, Negev light machine gun, and network radio communication equipment. Many of these Israeli weapons and platforms acquired by India, particularly loitering munitions and air defense system. Many of these are already acquired by India and were used during the Operation Sindoor, retaliating to Pakistan's attack following Operation Sindoor. India has used its latest loitering munitions such as Israeli Harops and the Harpy. So these were the things that were used by the India during Operation Sindoor. Several Israeli companies have partnered and formed joint ventures with Indian companies, and that will also help keep supplies to India going despite the war. Okay, so they will keep the supplies to India, maybe despite the war. A range of high precision engineering companies in India carrying out contract manufacturing for Israelis is likely to ensure sustenance of Israeli origin equipment remains unaffected. Okay, so that the things that we are importing from the Israel remains unaffected. An official said. This is in contrast with the impact another ongoing global conflict, the prolonged Russian Ukraine war, initially had on Indian military spare supplies and delayed delivery schedule. We know that the war with the Ukraine of Russia, so it has delayed the supplies and the delivery schedule of the S-400 long-range surface-to-air defense missile units. Official explained this was because many of the big platforms of the Indian military, such as fighter aircraft, transport. Okay. So, with support requiring huge maintenance support from Russia compared to the Israeli military hardware India has acquired over the years, the impact was significant even as India has started the maintenance of many Soviet era military equipment indigenously. Even if even India has started their own maintenance, but the impact was significant during the war. Another big factor that affected Russian military supplies to India was that the country was facing countering America's adversaries through sanctions. So it was CATSA Act that was in effect. Russia was subjected to more stringent economic sanctions from the West after the war started. Before Operation Sindoor, the Indian Air Force had used the Israeli Space 2000 Spice 2000 guided bombs. India has used these things for the Balakot air defense. The army has procured advanced Heron drones, even it's a Heron drones from the country in the last 2 years to amplify surveillance. So it's just said like we have got a number of weapons from Israel, and if the war stretches, the Indian military equipments will be affected and the supplies. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, so it's the editorial, the bog of war. Let's see what is here for us in bog of war. Bog. In what may prove to be a defining moment for Donald Trump's presidency. In the early hours of June 22, the US directly entered the Israel-Iran war. In a swift operation, US planes targeted three nuclear sites in Iran and retreated. Okay, so it has we have read the news that three nuclear sites were bombed. The American media reported the US B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. Just remember these names: B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that dropped 30,000 pound GPS guided bunker buster bombs. It's called GBU 57, massive ordnance penetrator. Okay. On the underground site at Fordo. Okay. It just bombed at Fordo, while other two sites at Natanz and Isfahan were targeted by Tomahawk missiles. Okay, it was targeted by Tomahawk missiles. Just remember the name. Sorry, it's Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles. Okay. Breaking the news on Truth Social, Trump ended his post with "Now is the time for peace." And after bombing, the president of US said, "Now it's time for peace." The assertion seems to flow from his oft repeated doctrine of peace through strength. It always said that peace, the path of peace goes through the strength. However, the history of US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, based on the same doctrine, certainly brought no peace to either of these nations or to the US. Okay, either it was Afghanistan or Iraq, they have said this before, but they never brought the peace to these nations. The bloodshed continued for years, and extremist groups like Al Qaeda and the Islamic State emerged from these wars to haunt the world. And there are number of terrorist organizations that emerged from these bombings or these wars. Could the US get bogged down yet another bomb? What would it mean for the Trump? So what effect it's going to have? Trump has often stated that his objective is to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Okay, so they just don't want Iran to have their own nuclear weapons. However, over the past few weeks, Trump clearly listed two goals and one aspirations. The first goal was that Iran should negotiate a deal for a peaceful nuclear program. So this is the first deal. And the second goal is that Iran should surrender in the war with Israel. His aspiration was to see a regime change in Iran. He had even threatened possible action in this regard in the future. Has the targeting of three nuclear sites brought Trump closer to achieving his goals and aspirations? Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has emphasized that Iran will not bring its nuclear program to zero. Okay, after all these things that was said by the US or the Israel, Iran is not going to close their nuclear program. A couple of hours after the US airstrike, Iran restarted air attacks on targets in Tel Aviv and Haifa in Israel. After the attacks by the Iran continued their attacks on Israel. Iranian officials have claimed that Fordo had been completely emptied and evacuated a long time ago and that it did not suffer irreversible damage. Okay, so there was no irreversible damage. It is not hard to imagine Iran taking precautions by taking a cue from the US airstrikes on Houthi targets earlier. Where so Iran had already taken precaution because Houthis were targeted earlier. Houthis is a you can say it's just a terrorist organization which fights for Iran. Western media reports had indicated that since late March, the US deployed six B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so there's a base of the US, Diego Garcia, in the Indian Ocean where six B-2 Spirit stealth bombers were deployed. These bombers were reportedly used to drop a GBU-57 MOP or underground Houthi targets in Yemen. Sorry, Houthi targets. Sorry, Houthis fought for Yemen. I'm sorry, just by mistake I said Iran. While the US was engaged in warding off attacks on a US vessel in the Red Sea, initially developed for psychological effect, the MOP was perhaps used to achieve a deal with the Houthis, which happened in May with both sides pledging not to attack each other. It would be hard to ascertain whether uranium enriching centrifuges and the stock of enriched uranium remain intact without having international inspections or invading Iran. Moreover, Russia has a Russian built Bushehr nuclear power plant. There is a Bushehr nuclear power plant that is built by Russia in Iran. Just remember these names also Bushehr, Fordo. So these are some important nuclear sites. Apart from the presence of hundreds of Russians building more nuclear facilities at the site, Russia had warned that an attack on the plant would have consequences comparable to the Chernobyl accident of USSR 1986. The Chernobyl accident led to prolonged release into the atmosphere of large quantities of radioactive substance, including gases, aerosols, and finely fragile fragmented nuclear fuel particles due to specific conditions such as graphite fires. So, in 1986, there was an accident which led to a release of a large quantity of radioactive substance in the including gases, aerosols, and fragmented nuclear fuel particles in the atmosphere due to specific conditions such as graphite fires and winds radioactivity. As there was graphite fire and winds, the radioactivity had spread across the northern hemisphere. It has just spread to the northern hemisphere, many Europe, and was also recorded in the US, Canada, and Japan. Even in US, Canada, and Japan, it was recorded. The targeting of nuclear sites which are not nuclear power plants with the objective of destroying centrifuges used for uranium enrichment. So the nuclear sites which are not nuclear power plants with the objective of destroying centrifuges used for uranium enrichment remains a dangerous proposition. It is a dangerous proposition. These nuclear sites may also be storage sites for radioactive material, including spent fuel or high level waste. It is great relief to the global community that the head of the Iranian National Center for Nuclear Safety System has confirmed that no radioactive contamination, at least there was no radioactive contamination after the bombing or radio. By mid morning, the IAEA too informed that no increase in office on off-site radiation levels had been reported. The Saudi Nuclear and Radiological Regulatory Commission independently confirmed the same for all the Gulf Cooperation Council states. So at least even after the bombing, there was no uh, increase in the nuclear radiation in the region. By naming his successors, the supreme leader of Iran has ensured that regimes remain intact in any eventuality. Okay, even the Iran has named his successor. The US attacks on nuclear sites in a country that takes pride in its scientific prowess are likely to solidify public support for the supreme leader as a rallying point in the Israel-Iran war. Sabotage, miscalculations, or accidents could still draw US troops into the theater. It might be recalled that about 125,000 US and British troops had invaded Iraq in March 2003 to oust Saddam Hussein, trapping the US in a bloody war which over 8 years killed 4,400 of its soldiers and injured several thousands. The US withdrew fully by December 2011, but destabilization of the region saw the emergence of thus the ace in Iraq around 2012 and the rise of caliphate. The US-led coalition was forced to return to the theater in 2014. The rest is history. So it is just all that in 2003 US went to Iraq and they have killed a number of people. Their own soldiers were killed. But what they got at the end is nothing. Just um, they just destabilized the Middle East, either it's Iraq or Afghanistan. So war is not an option for other countries. US often describes the Middle East as a threat for the world, but is it? That's the question. As more questions are asked about the remaining capability of Iran, will the US continue to indulge in adventurism that could result in nuclear catastrophe for the region and beyond? Trump's economic plans would come to standstill if he needs to manage the physical, political, and legal fall out of such actions. With the airstrikes, the US has lost the power to bring Iran to the negotiating table as its own on its own. It would need help from Russia and Europe and maybe also China to pursue nuclear talks with Iran. The world is in a dangerous phase. And after bombing Iran, it's hard to bring Iran to the table for talk. Let's see what happens in the future. Defining dangerous. US strikes on Iran mark a fraught end to years of kicking nuclear can down the road. Much depends on what Tehran does next. The President Trump's decision to join Israel's war against Iran on Sunday morning with the bombing of three major nuclear facilities at Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz could either force the Iranian regime to surrender or move decisively towards a wider war in the region. Although President Trump has claimed that the attacks have been successful, it will be a while before the full impact of the bombing of the nuclear sites in Iran will be known. Okay, so sorry. So these are the sites. What? Okay, so these were the sites which were bombed. Ground level information will provide key inputs into understanding the extent of damage. Okay, so it will take time that how much damage was done by the US. Even more important is that the nature of political impact of American bombing. Israel's war against Iran that began on June 13 had already done considerable damage to the regime and its structures, including the armed forces. intelligence establishment, and the nuclear scientific community, but the Iranian regime has managed to survive and has succeeded in hitting back against Israel. It remains to be seen if the American attacks marks a death blow to the regime or rally Iranian nationalism in favor of the Islamic Republic. So, in the coming days, it will decide what's going to happen. Will Iran come and the Iran's people will come in favor of the Islamic Republic, or will the US succeeds? Trump's attack have come well before the end of the 2 week pause he had announced to explore ostensibly peaceful resolution of the conflict between Israel and Iran. Cynics say the talk of a 2 week time out was a political feint. Since the announcement, the US had steadily mobilized a massively military force in the Gulf, including 2 aircraft carriers and several B 2 bombers that can deliver the bunker buster munition to destroy the further nuclear facility built built deep inside a mountain. In a short statement on the bombing decision, Trump said the strikes are limited to destroying Iran's nuclear weapons capability and that the ball is now in Iran's court. So Iran will decide what's going to happen. If Iran sues for peace, there can be serious diplomacy for peace. But if Iran seeks to widen the war by attacking the US or allied targets, Trump warned that more attacks will follow. All eyes will now be on Tehran's response. It is no secret that Israel's goal has not been limited to a rollback of Iranian nuclear program, that it seeks a regime change in Tehran. Tel Aviv has long sought to bring the US into the war and leverage Washington's full weight to induce political change in Iran. Although Trump did not explicitly support the regime change objective, he made it clear that he seeks a change in the behavior of the Islamic Republic. He seems to have left the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei with no option but to surrender and survive on Trump's terms. Within the US, the right wing opponents of the war in Trump's political base are bound to be disappointed with the president's decision. They had mounted a serious campaign against the traditional temptation in Washington to intervene on Israel's side. They questioned the claim that Iran has built or it's about to build a nuclear weapons. They wanted the White House not to forget that previous efforts at regime change in Iraq and Libya had ended in disaster and cost the US much blood and treasure. Trump, however, appears to have calculated that total victory over Tehran is possible with a short and swift bombing campaign and that there would be no need for sending ground troops into Iran. It will not be long before the world sees either a familiar tragedy unfold in the Middle East or internal change in Iran that moves that region in new direction. Okay. Okay, the next is how to fully count women in. So how women is going to be counted in the coming time. Upcoming census must be gender responsive in design and execution. So what it says, numbers have always told stories of progress, pain and power, but too often they have also erased people at the margins. As the country prepares for its next census, we must ask, will we count women in a way that reflects their diversity and realities? Or will the most marginalized be once again statistically invisible and politically excluded? The passage of Women's Reservation Bill, that is 106th Amendment Act, passed in September 2023, was a watershed moment, but its implementation has been delayed as it depends on the delimitation exercise tied to the census. This means that how we conduct the census will shape not only who gets counted, but also gets a seat at the table potentially for decades to come. Therefore, the upcoming census is not just a statistical operation, it is a unique opportunity to shape the scaffolding for an inclusive democracy. But for that, to happen, it must be gender responsive in design and execution. Over the past decade, I have witnessed firsthand how women in politics confront entrenched structural hurdles. Casual sexism within party ranks, lack of access to campaign finance, being ignored by the media, threats of violence, both online and physical, and being constantly overlooked by their respective political parties in ticket distribution for legislative seats. These challenges are magnified for women belonging to marginalized communities. Dalit, Adivasi, Muslim, queer, and disabled women, among others, face multiple and intersecting layers of discrimination. Simply reserving seats without addressing the ecosystem of exclusion will only reproduce inequalities in new forms. So, the census will not only be about collecting sex disaggregated data, it should recognize that women are not a monolith and ensure that questionnaires reflect that complexity. These are some steps that can be taken. Gender data can be cross tabulated with indicators for literacy, employment, land ownership. So, what are the steps that can be taken? Like gender data can be cross tabulated with indicators for literacy, employment, land ownership, bodily abilities, religion, caste, etc. Partnering with experts in gender and caste research, keeping in mind that caste and subcaste formation can also be regional in nature. Building public data portals that allow civil society to filter, analyze, and visualize gender aggregated data. Most importantly, the enumerators should be trained in gender sensitivity. In 2011, the census made a landmark move by including a separate other gender category, but the enumeration process was poorly designed and inconsistently applied. It was not designed well. This led to underreporting and misclassification of trans and non-binary persons. The next generation needs to correct this process of insensitivity and invisibilization. Some may argue that implementing a robust gender responsive census is too resource intensive. Yet, without it, we risk implementing laws that are still rooted in the status quo. Applied to women's representation, it will replicate existing power structures with privileged women at the helm. Once the Women's Reservation Act is enacted, after a gender responsive census, we can monitor if reserved seats across constituencies reflect the diversity of India's female population, if selection process by political parties for reserved seats are evidence backed instead of being arbitrary, that there is a pipeline from panchayat to parliament to prevent co-option co-optation by elite women. These mechanisms would ensure that policy is not tokenistic and actually represents the women of India. Further, it will help us answer these critical questions. How do we ensure women from other backward classes are not overlooked in seat allocations? How will political parties be held accountable for fielding women candidates from SC/ST communities, not just in reserved constituencies but also in general ones? So there are questions how the woman will come in the OBC, how it will come from the C, how is T, or even in the unreserved category. Gender disaggregated data would make visible those who are routinely ignored, and visibility matters because it seeds awareness, enables activism, and builds political pressure. A census that fails to see women in all their lived realities is incomplete and unjust. The census is a political mirror, but without gender responsive tools, it offers only a distorted reflection. Every person counts in a representative democracy, and every woman must be counted where it matters most. in our legislatures, policies, and collective future, because women are not just half the population, we are half the potential. It's high time India sees us that way. And we all know, to develop a country, only half of the population will be not useful. The other half should also work for the development of the country, and that's why the woman is important in all the places. Okay. Digging deeper, evidence not politics must shape the story of Khizidi, one of the most significant archaeological sites of the recent times. Okay, so there is a excavation of, oh come on, there's an archaeological site, that's Khizidi. Okay, that's in Tamil Nadu. Okay, just remember that's in Tamil Nadu. As Tamil Brahmin inscriptions on pot shards paint accompanying picture of flourishing. Sure, okay, okay, leave it. These things. The next step for change. Now there's a data for the poverty. Okay, let's read this one. The next steps for change. It has been 46 minutes. We have 14 minutes to go. As PM Modi completes 11 years in office, it's time for stock taking of his government's achievements at the macro level and a framing of the challenges that lie ahead. For comparison, we also looked at the UPA government's record from 2004 to 14. In 2014, when PM Modi assumed office, in India's nominal GDP stood at 2.4 trillion. This was the GDP at 2020 in 2014, 709 in 2004 when the UPA came to power. And when the UPA came to power, it was $709 billion. This was jumped 2.8 times in 10 years. So in 10 years, it jumped with around 2.8 times. This year, India's economy is 4.1 trillion. Current, it stands at 4.1 trillions, and it has almost doubled in 11 years. India is poised to become the fourth largest economy globally, just behind the US, China, and Germany. It is just behind the three countries. Yet the nominal GDP in US dollars tells only a part of the story. But if we talk about the nominal GDP, as we have a large population, we should not forget. Everybody says that what is the nominal GDP of Germany or Japan? We may have overtaken Japan, but what's the nominal GDP? Let me tell you the population. It's the population that is keeping us behind in the nominal GDP. So, being a large population, we have large opportunities for the development, and the government needs to work for this. Okay, a more appropriate criterion to measure the economic welfare of the people will be look at GDP per capita income in purchasing power parity. What a US dollar can buy in country. So what is PPP? That what a US dollar can buy in a country. In PPP terms, India's progress has been remarkable, from 2.75 trillion in 2004 to 6.45 trillion in 2014 and 17 trillion in 2025. So, in power of in case of purchasing power parity, the India stands at 17 trillion in 2025. This position India as the world's third largest economy in purchasing power terms, and India is third largest in purchasing power terms, beyond China 40 trillion and US 30 trillion. However, national aggregates can obscure individual well-being. Evaluating people's welfare and quality of life requires measuring per capita income in PPP terms. India's per capita income rose from $2,000 to around $5,000 in 2014 and now stands at $12,000 in 2025. This improvement corresponds with India's improved global ranking on this criteria from 181st in 2004 to 166th in 2014 and 149th in 2025. So in last 20 years, India has decreased the position with around 30. or 32. However, despite this progress, India still ranks lowest among G20 countries. Among G20, India is still the lowest with per capita GDP is around $2,800, and in purchasing power, it is around $12,000. China's per capita stands at 28,000, and the US leads with $89,000. Closer home, India trails even Sri Lanka. Even in the Sri Lanka, it is at $14,000 and Bhutan $17,000, though it remains ahead of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Nevertheless, the macroeconomics milestones are indeed impressive and India needs to stay the course. But there is always one question associated with such macro trends. How far is the growth inclusive? The Gini coefficient, a measure of income inequality, it is a measure of income inequality, how much inequality is there in a country, has shown only modest shifts over the past 2 decades. It was 0.34 in 2014 and ended up slightly 0.35 and dropped to 0.33 in 2021, indicating moderate inequality in India according to the World Bank. So the inequality is not so high, it is just moderate. For inclusive growth, the performance of agriculture, employing the largest share of the workforce, around 46% of the population is employed in the agriculture in India. Despite consecutive droughts in 2014-15 and 15-16, agricultural GDP under the Modi government grew at an average annual rate of 4%. Even there was droughts, but still the growth rate was around 4%, surpassing 3.5% of 2005 to 14. On the welfare front, the Modi government has spent a lot of resources of uplift poor and farming community. This includes almost free staples, rice or wheat subsidies, housing. Okay, so there were free staples, rising house subsidies, and supporting farmers with PM Kisan direct income support scheme and a near freeze on urea prices. All this has led to sharp reduction in extreme poverty at $3 per day from 27% in 2011 to just 5.3% in 2022. So even the poverty has decreased from 27% to 5.3%. The 80% drop marks one of the fastest and most significant fall in poverty that India has achieved in any period since 1977. Even when measured against the higher poverty line threshold of $4, so it is measured at $3 per day. Even if we measure at $4 per day for lower middle income countries, poverty had dropped from 57% to 23%, representing a steep 60% decline. This unprecedented acceleration in poverty reduction is one of the biggest achievements of PM Modi. With poverty levels now at historic lows, there may be need to revisit some of the major policies. Okay, maybe it is at historic lows, but we should revisit the policies to plug loopholes and promote efficiency and sustainability. We look at food and fertilizer subsidies as they claim the largest resources in the agri-food space and yet give suboptimal results. The food subsidy budget for financial year 26 is slated to 2 lakh crore. India is giving free food to more than 80 crore people with extreme poverty falling to just 5.3%. There is need to rationalize this food subsidy by giving beneficiaries food coupons or the digital wallet to buy nutritious food, pulses, milks, eggs from designated stores. The value of food coupons from the bottom, say 15% of the population, could be rupees 700 family per month, and this amount can be come down to 500 per family per month based on the income of the identified beneficiary. This will help plug leakages, diversify diets, promote nutrition. Similar rationalization is needed for fertilizer subsidy, which is slated to claim another rupees 1.56 lakh crore in financial 26. This can be done by giving fertilizer coupons to farmers and deregulating the prices of fertilizers products. Farmers can use these coupons to buy chemical fertilizers or biofertilizers or do natural farming. The imbalanced use of NPK can be corrected, leakages plugged, and innovations in products and practices promoted. Only if the government deregulates this sector, this task is overdue. And if PM Modi government can do it now, it will help streamline the agri-food sector. sector to a large extent. The Modi government can reach dividends in terms of saving financial resources, higher efficiency in the use of fertilizers, less dependence on imports, and less environmental degradation, especially of soil, water, and air. The government would need to identify tenant farmers. The task also requires triangulation of several sets of data and communicating with farmers in advance and earning their trust. This is a political exercise which must precede policy change. No one else is better communicator in the political sphere today than the Prime Minister himself. Okay, this was all about this. When a nuclear site is attacked. Okay, so here is another. We can talk what happens uh, for the nuclear site, which is 3,000 deep. Okay, let's see about just the B2 plane carrying 50,000 feet. The weight is just as much as a school bus. It uses GPS to reach the target. The bomb hits the ground near supersonic velocity. Upon impact, the rounded head gradually distributes the initial crushing forces through the steel casing, allowing it to reach the target intact. Okay, so there can be radiation leak risk when it is bombed, like substances like gaseous state of uranium hexafluoride or uranium dust. Radioactive substances are unstable and release radiation over time. Some of these radiations, like gamma rays, are harmful. They can penetrate the skin, damage cells. So, if we say what the how it will affect is, it can affect the skin, damage our cells, DNA, and can result in intergenerational health impact. As we can see in Japan, these radioactive substances are stored and handled in carefully designed containers. It is used to try to minimize the risk of any leak of radioactive material in the outer environment or in sources of food and water. An attack on such nuclear facilities, like one carried out by Israel or the US in Iran, can damage or disrupt these mechanisms. So, two of the biggest um, instances of the leakages were in Chernobyl in 1986 or Fukushima in 2011, and it was a disaster for the world. And there was a Zaporozhye nuclear power plant that is in Ukraine. There was also it was attacked by the Russia. Okay, what are the strategic strikes? There has been no instance of major radiation leak, though Zaporozhye is at constant and ongoing risk. Threat there is comparatively low, mainly from gunshots and shelling. So it's just you can read. Okay, the bunker buster bombs and the bombers that dropped then for the US. Okay, so it's a Strait of Hormuz. Okay, as we read, Strait of Hormuz might be closed. Okay, that was all. Okay, 90 minutes they bombed and they just get lost then. Okay, that was all. Thank you everyone, and we will meet tomorrow with a new topic. Thank you.